as Bernie often asks, are you ready to fight for someone you don't know? And with that, I would love to introduce Nick Shute. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Shute. I'm a third-generation family farmer from Alden, and I'm a proud endorser of Senator Bernie Sanders. We're all here today because we're concerned about the future of rural Iowa. We've seen politicians come and go, make big promises, and rarely deliver, while our small towns and farms continue to suffer. I remember the farm crisis and the pain and heartache it caused 40 years ago. If we keep following the corporate Farm Bureau plan, the future doesn't look better. In fact, it looks a lot like the 80s right now. Rising farm debt, low commodity prices, and a complete unnecessary trade war. On top of that, we all have this constant threat of climate change. Independent family farmers in Iowa cannot survive another farm crisis. We would be left in a world of manure, pesticides, and no healthy soil. A world where millions of acres of Iowa farmland are owned by a few greedy corporations. A world where our small towns are left to turn to dust. I reject this world. I believe in a future with real right to farm, the right to a fair price, the right to get into farming without going bankrupt, and the right for our towns to have access to good health care, good schools, and good roads. Bernie's my candidate because he believes in that future too. More importantly, he will fight for that future. He believes in the dignity of people regardless of their backgrounds. Some of the poorest, most Republican counties here went for Bernie in 2016 because they saw a candidate who actually cared about their families. There's a lot of hopelessness in our rural communities, but he gave us hope. Under the Sanders administration, our voices and concerns will be heard. When Bernie Sanders is in the White House, he will fight for us because he always has. And now I'll turn it over to Jim Bird, my friend from Belmont.
You know, we must be doing something right. The campaign, Bernie Sanders' campaign must be doing something right. The other day I come home and my yard sign was gone. Somebody stole my yard sign. I said, what the hell? I said, boy, either that somebody's really threatened by us or it's a very valuable commodity. My name is Jim Bird. I'm a retired maintenance tech from Belmont, and I'm delighted to stand with Bernie today because he stands with all of us. The first time I saw Bernie was on C-SPAN, going after Alan Greenspan, Fed chair. He says, you're out of touch. I stood up off my couch, I pointed at the TV, looked at my wife and said, pocket. So needless to say, 2015, I was there. Guy from Mason City called me, and the organizer called me, and he said, you want to come to Mason City? And I said, sure. So I went over there, and the rest is history. I want to tell you a little bit about Belmont. Belmont earlier this year just got notice that their manufacturing plant is going to announce they're closing. About 200 jobs. In its heyday, there was about 800 jobs been outsourced, going down south, like so many other plants. It's going to be a deep cut for our community. It could hurt for a long time. And if we stay on the path we are on, our best hope is to go begging for the next corporation to take over the plant, I guess. And I say that's enough. I said enough to rule in small town Iowa being a playhouse of big ag and big corp. Enough of our communities being told that we have to accept whatever corporations feel people in charge of shaping our future, and that's why I'm standing here with Bernie Sanders, because he gets it. It's not about him, it's about everyone gets health care. where we don't have to live in fear of corporations leaving us behind. Now, if you're not sold on Bernie yet, let me show you this. This is my Medicare supplemental plan. The guy sold me, he showed me this little pamphlet. He says, I go, this is a plan for me. I said, this is all I need to know. Well, then a month later, I got this, 300 pages of what I really needed to know to be a Medicare expert. I said, what the hell? I said, what's going on here? Just the other day, I was on Facebook, and I found Bernie Sanders' plan. This is all you need to know to be a Medicare for All expert under Bernie Sanders' plan. It has wages, it's got a progressive setting. You pay your taxes, which is just like a premium, but I tell you what, it's a heck of a lot lower than what you're paying now. Under here, it's no co-pays, no deductibles, no surprise charges, dental and vision. That's what we need to go to. So if you want this, vote for the other guy. With that, I'd like to introduce Chris Dixon of NNU.
Hello, my fellow Iowans. It's great to be here today. My name is Chris Dixon, and I have been a registered nurse for more than 3 decades. I'm a proud member, thank you. I'm a proud member of Nurses United and also proud to provide bedside care in Des Moines. I'm a longtime Bernie Sanders supporter, including when our union endorsed Bernie 4 years ago and joined him on the campaign trail. And with our National Nurses United endorsement for Bernie for president for 2020, the race just a few weeks ago we endorsed him. I'm so very pleased to talk to my fellow Iowans about why nurses have returned to the campaign trail to support our friend and the champion of so many causes we hold dear, Senator Bernie Sanders. National Nurses United has a slogan, vote nurses' values. And there's no candidate who better embodies nurses' values than Bernie. As a nurse, I have devoted my life to caring for my patients and providing them for support, care, and protection they need every day, including in their darkest hours and their most vulnerable times. Even our patients with health care insurance suffer needlessly because they can't afford the care they need.
You're not plugged in.
Some of our diabetic patients lose limbs, and some of our cancer patients die because they can't afford preventative care and because their insurance denies them the care they need. And 30 million people have no health insurance whatsoever. Millions of families in America have to choose between paying for rent, food, or their medication. 1/3 of all GoFundMe pages today, their campaigns are to pay medical bills. Right here in Iowa Falls, you have watched as your own hospital cut vital services. I understand the local hospital, Hanson Family Hospital, no longer delivers babies. Instead, you have to drive outside of town to have your babies. Do I have this right?
Yes.
Seems like the hospital said it just didn't make financial sense to keep the labor and delivery unit open after the last OB/GYN doctor left the hospital. Well, I personally don't know the folks who work at Hanson Hospital. I imagine they are good, caring people who make their home right here in this community. And they are not to blame. But I do know Hanson Hospital is an affiliate of Mercy One. And the guy who runs Mercy One took home nearly $1.3 million last year. Now, if you go up the Mercy One chain, you find it is a joint venture run by 2 massive corporations, Trinity Health and Common Spirit. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Well, the man at the top of Trinity Health took home $2.5 million last year. Pretty good. But the folks who are really making out in all of this are the two men overseeing Common Spirit. One of these men nearly made $7 million. The other took home a bit more. Would you like to guess? Maybe $8 million, maybe $9 million. We'll try $13 million. So you have to ask, now where is the money going that should be keeping the OB/GYN unit open at your hospital? Well, it doesn't have to be this way. As nurses, we are committed to advocating for our patients so that everyone gets the highest quality of care they deserve. That's why for decades, the nurses have been leading the grassroots movement to win the guaranteed health care as a human right with Medicare for all. Medicare for all means simply that everyone will be able to see the doctor they want and seek care at the hospital they choose. There will be no insurance premiums, no deductibles, no copays, because there will no longer be health insurance companies profiting off patients' pain and suffering. We will eliminate the profiteering by the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and we'll have a health care system that is actually about health care and not profits. And we will be able to rationally deal with the escalating crisis in rural health care in this country, where hospitals and needed services like delivering babies are closing left and right, and the escalating crisis in poor communities in our urban areas where hospitals have also been closing, leaving so many of us high and dry. And do you know what? We could do that spending less money as a country than we currently do now, because we eliminate the insurance companies' profits and bloated bureaucracy. You heard me right. We will be, as a country, be able to provide care to everyone and actually spend less than we do now. So the question isn't what some in the media have been asking. How are we going to afford that? The question really should be, what are we going to do with all that extra money? And you know who has been with us all along? Bernie Sanders. For decades, Bernie has shown us time and time again that he has shared our determination to make sure that health care is a basic human right. Bernie knows that Medicare for all is the only solution to guarantee health care for everyone, and at the same time, control the runaway costs our country spends on health care. We are proud that through Nurses Campaign for Medicare for All, Bernie's passionate advocacy in the Senate, and grassroots activism throughout the U.S., Medicare for All is now a top issue in the 2020 presidential race. As union nurses, we all support Bernie because he is leading all the candidates on his platform to restore the rights of workers to organize unions. Yeah. Power that we as nurses are able to advocate for our patients without fear of retaliation by our hospital managers. Bernie understands the struggle of the poor and the working class because that is his own background. He is one of us, the hard-working 1%. Bernie understands the dangers of corporations and the billionaire-millionaire class. He knows how they exploit workers with complete disregard to human rights, civil rights, or safety unless they are checked. Bernie understands that it's union power, collaborative worker power, that keeps employers in check. Bernie is with us in calling for an end to right-to-work laws and at-will employment. He understands the right of all workers to strike, but workers to strike must be protected, pensions must be protected, and the federal minimum wage must be raised to at the very least $15 an hour. We know that Bernie is dedicated to rebuilding a labor movement that we see is growing with determined spirit. But we all know too well there are strong forces working to destroy that spirit. We need someone who, as an organizer-in-chief, will do that, needs to be done to protect workers' rights from the 1% that keeps amassing more and more wealth. We need someone who will support and protect workers as they use their collective power to shape not only their workplaces, but to push forward policies and legislation that will enrich all people living in the United States. And Bernie Sanders is that candidate. In 2016, I made a trip across Iowa with Bernie. I was with him as we met with people from all walks of life: teachers, farmers, students, factory workers, office workers, union workers. And I watched as their faces changed and began to light up as they listened to Bernie. I could see how his enthusiasm became their enthusiasm. I saw how his belief that working people have the power to make this country work for everyone because their belief that they can make the changes that will lift us all up. We don't support Bernie because we support his issues. We support Bernie because he supports our issues. And that change happens from the bottom up when we all, friends, families, neighbors, and coworkers, join together in a common purpose for the good of our communities and our country. When Bernie is president, nurses and all working people will have a powerful ally in the White House. Nurses know it's time to elect Bernie Sanders, the next president of the United States. Let's make this happen. I thank you, and I introduce to you our friend and ally, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Iowa Falls. Let me thank Conrad and Nick and Jim and Chris for their very beautiful remarks. I heard it all in the back room there. And to thank all of you for coming out in an unprecedented and difficult moment in American history. So what I'd like to do is chat for a few minutes about why I'm running for president, and then like to engage in a conversation with you on some of the issues that are on your minds, and then you can ask me any questions that you'd like. One of the things that we're trying to do in this campaign, and I think succeeding in, is kind of getting people to think outside of the box, to ask questions that we don't often see asked in the Congress or asked in the media, and then to try to visualize where we should be going as a nation. Let me just touch on some of those issues. Right now, as Iowa certainly knows, we got a presidential election coming up. You've seen one or two candidates in your state. In fact, your population of your state has gone up by 38%. All of the candidates coming in here. But what we don't often ask about our country is to what degree today we really are a democracy. And I come from a small rural state, probably even more rural than Iowa. And we have town meetings every year where people get together, rooms like this, to argue about how much they want to spend on education, on the roads, and municipal government. And at the end of those meetings, people raise their hands, and you got one person, one vote. That's what it's about. One person, one vote. Nobody has two votes. Nobody's buying the election. So we got to ask ourselves where we are as a democracy today. And I got to tell you, I am very, very concerned about the corruption of our political process and the fact today that billionaires, people with unlimited amounts of money, are able to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to buy elections. People in this country throughout our history have fought and died to preserve democracy. And democracy is a pretty radical idea from world history perspective. What it means is you have a vote and you got a vote, and it's not a king or a queen or a billionaire determining the future of your country. But I am worried about where we are with democracy, And I'm worried about the ability today of billionaires to control our government. That's issue number one. Issue number two that we don't talk about a whole lot. And that is the state of the economy. Just read the other day, the economy is doing great. Really? Could have fooled me. Is the economy doing great when in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people, 50% of our people, including people in this room today, are working paycheck to paycheck? Do you all know what that means, working paycheck to paycheck? Yeah. All right, hear that loudly. I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. And what wealthier people don't understand is that if you're living paycheck to paycheck and your car breaks down, you got a family disaster. Because you may not have the $500 you need to get a new motor, or to fix the engine, or whatever. So, and you can't get to work, and if you can't get to work, you can't get a paycheck, you can't get a paycheck, you can't take care of your family. And you got half of the workers in this country who are living under that kind of stress. And we don't talk about stress. I was the chairman of a subcommittee in the Senate, and we held a hearing. It was called Poverty as a Death Sentence. What do I mean by that? What does that mean, poverty as a death sentence? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Not enough. Medical.
What it means is that if you're poor or working class in America, you're going to die at on average, you're going to die at a significantly younger age than if you have a whole lot of money. It's like a 15-year spread. You are wealthy, you're going to live a lot longer than people who are working class or poor. Why is that? And it's not even just access to health care, which is a very important part about that. What happens when you are struggling economically? Stress. Who wants to talk about stress? What does that mean, stress? Worried about money. Who wants to say a word about that? Yep.
Stress. There you go. Stress can make you sick. Stress, not only mentally wears you out, but it also physically wears you out. And it is the main cause of a lot of diseases, between heart attacks and all different kinds of mental illness. Being poor is hard. And working yourself out of being poor is even harder. And we need to have a fair shake at a future, and they need hope. They need hope of being able to lift themselves up and get out of poverty.
You know, what Carrie just said in 1 minute is what people write big books about. She's hit the nail right on the head. What happens if you're making $8 or $9 an hour, $10 an hour, and you got a family to support? Now, I'm not just talking about not having a fancy car or a fancy house. What happens to you emotionally and physically when you're living under those conditions? Who wants to jump in on that one?
You get worn out.
Pick up. Raise your hand, please.
You get worn out.
Stand up.
Oh. You get worn out, and you...
Give him the mic. Take the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
You get worn out. You can't make it. You might have to work even if you're sick, and you can exacerbate the issues that you already have. You can exhaust yourself into a place where your immune system is not working up to its full ability, and you might hurt yourself and not have any way to take care of that. You end up without a job or worse.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Yes, I see a hand back there. Right back there.
You're tired, you feel humiliated, you can't work to better yourself, right? Like, how do you get home and then take night classes? How do you get home, take care of your family, and do other things to better your life? You're stuck in a perpetual system that you're just basically surviving, and you can't get any better.
Okay, wow. I mean, thank you for all of the comments. And there are millions of people. We don't talk about it. See, this is why I want to raise these issues. We don't talk about it as a nation. But millions of people are feeling that stress, feeling a sense of failure with regard to their kids, a sense of hopelessness in terms of how they could advance in life. And you know what the result of that is in rural America? Life expectancy is actually going down. This is unbelievable. All over the world, because of new technologies, better healthcare, life expectancies are going up. Among upper income Americans, middle class Americans, life expectancy is going up. But for rural working class people, life expectancy is going down. And that's a lot to do with what the folks just talked about, a feeling of despair. And in fact, doctors call it diseases of despair. That means when people feel hopeless and they worry so much about their kids, they turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs, and increasingly in rural America, they even turn to suicide. All right? So this is part of what's going on in the richest country in the history of the world, in an economy which is supposedly doing very well.
Capitalism kills.
So what our job is to create an economy, not a radical idea, that works for all of us and not just the few. And while so many people are struggling, and so many people are dying, and so many people are dealing with stress and suffering, you got 3 people on top owning more wealth than the bottom half of America. You got CEOs of huge agribusiness firms making $150 million in compensation packages, while family farmers are being driven off of the land. You got 87 million people who have no health insurance or are underinsured. You got kids who are leaving school deeply in debt. So the bottom line of what our campaign is about is not very radical. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, at a time when over the last 30 years, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth, while the bottom half of American society has seen a decline in their wealth. All we are saying is that we want a government and an economy that works for working people, not just the 1%. I don't think that is a radical idea. And when we talk about a rational economy that works for all people, we of course are talking about healthcare as a human right. Healthcare is a human right. Question. Here's my question to you. You know, I'm often perceived by my opponents, by the establishment, by the media, I'm a radical guy, I believe in healthcare for all. How many major countries are there in this world that do not guarantee healthcare to all? Anyone know the answer?
All of them but us.
That's right. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. In Canada, if you have a serious health problem, you have major surgery, you're in the hospital for a month, you would run up a bill equivalent in the United States to hundreds of thousands of dollars. What's your bill in a Canadian hospital? Anyone know?
Zero.
Zero! You go to any doctor you want, you go to any hospital you want, and yet at the end of that, the Canadians, like every other major country on earth, are spending half as much per person on health care as we do. We're spending almost $11,000 on health care for every man, woman, and child in this country on health care. And as Chris mentioned a moment ago, the function of health care must not simply be to make the insurance companies and the drug companies wealthy. It is not a radical idea to say that the function of health care should be to guarantee quality care to all as a right, not just make huge profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies. This is not a radical idea. Now, as you know, we're getting hassled, we're getting attacked, not just by the healthcare industry, of course we are, not just by the drug companies, not just by Trump and the Republican Party, getting attacked by some Democrats. But I believe the time is now, not tomorrow, not 10 years from now. You know, when you talk about healthcare as a human right, not a radical idea in America. Teddy Roosevelt talked about it 100 years ago. FDR talked about it. In the 1940s, Harry Truman talked about it. Kennedy talked about it. Lyndon Johnson talked about it. Obama talked about it. Maybe after 100 years of discussion, maybe, just maybe, the time is now to take on the healthcare. You know, 100 years of talk is maybe just enough. And here's what the answer is. Let me tell you, everyone, oh, Bernie's ideas are too radical. They will, be very confusing, all that other stuff. That's not the issue. This is not a healthcare issue because nobody can defend the dysfunctionality of the healthcare system. How do you defend a system in which you spend twice as much as the people of any other country, and yet you've got 87 million people who are uninsured and underinsured? How do you defend the system where 30,000 people die each year? Yes, because they don't get to a doctor when they should have. So, Chris, you have seen that, yes? People walk into the doctor's office way later than they should have, and their situation is terminal. How do you defend the situation? This one is really unbelievable. 500,000 people in this country go bankrupt because they were diagnosed with cancer or some other terrible illness. Can you imagine? Think about it. Step outside of the box. You go to the doctor said, I got bad news for you. You're dealing with cancer, you're dealing with this or that serious illness. You got enough to worry about how you get well. And then you got to sit there worrying about, how am I going to afford $100,000 in treatment? And the end result is 500,000 people go bankrupt because of medically related bills, and many others see their credit scores destroyed because they're late in paying their medical bills. And people are getting sued by hospital, people are getting sued, they can't pay their medical bills. Step outside the box and you say, this is totally insane. How does it happen that the drug companies last year made $69 billion in profits, and 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescription their doctors write? It's insane. It is insane. And it's because you have a healthcare system designed to profit the drug companies and the insurance companies, not to provide quality care to all of our people. But we're going to change that. And if we have to take on the Republicans, that's fine. And if we have to take on the healthcare industry, that's fine. If we have to take on half the Democratic Party, that's fine. But the time is now for Medicare for all. And we have to just a couple of other issues, because then I want to open it up to the discussion. 4 years ago, when I came here to Iowa, what I said is that we have to rethink education in America, that the world has changed, technology has changed, global economy has changed, and we need to make public colleges and universities tuition free so that all of our young people, or anybody, has the opportunity to get a higher education. And by that I mean not just college, but trade school, whatever you would like to do to learn the skills you need to get a good job. That we need to make sure that all of our people, regardless of their income, are able to do that. And 4 years ago, that was a very radical idea. Well, it's not so radical anymore, because all over this country, young people and their parents have stood up and said, you know what? Our kids are entitled to a decent education without having to go $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. So what you're seeing is state after state, community after community, city after city moving in that direction. And the other point that we are making is that if Congress, against my vote, could bail out the crooks on Wall Street in 2009 to the tune of trillions of dollars of zero-interest loans, if Trump and his friends think of $1 trillion in tax breaks to the very, very rich, we can cancel all student debt in this country, all student debt. And we do that through a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. Last point that I want to make, there's a whole lot of other issues that are out here, but I can't, we'll just engage in a discussion in a minute. Last issue is an issue that I feel increasingly strongly about. And that is, the more I study the issue, the more I talk to people about the issue. We have got to understand that climate change is an existential threat to this country and to the world. Now, it is very sad, and I say this as somebody who disagrees with Trump on everything, but on this particular issue, what Trump and those people who agree with him, what they are doing is literally dooming future generations to an increasingly unhealthy and dangerous life, because they are refusing to recognize not only the reality of climate change, but the need to move forward very, very aggressively. And here is what is scary. The scientists are now telling us that they have underestimated the severity and the degree to which climate change today is ravaging this country and the world. They always knew it was man-made, they always knew it was serious, but they said we underestimated the problem. You don't have to read books on this. Look with your own eyes about what is happening in the last few years. You know, when you talk about climate, they talk about it over millions of years. We are seeing changes within our own lifetimes. You're seeing it in Iowa, we're seeing it in Vermont, we're seeing it all over the world. I was in Paradise, California. That name of that town mean anything to anybody? That's where that terrible wildfire a couple of years ago. I went there. 86 people died in the town. Talked to people who never thought they were going to get out alive. It was like an apocalypse. You have fires burning in California. Australia is now on fire. Last summer, Europe had its most severe heat wave in history. You're talking about rising sea levels, the polar caps melting, ocean warming. If we don't get our act together, major cities in the United States, Miami, Charleston, South Carolina, New York City, will be all or partially underwater by the end of the century. Countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, low-level coastal countries will be underwater. You talk about agriculture, so important here. In Iowa, farmers are not going to be able to produce the crops they historically have when the temperature becomes much warmer, when there's drought, when there's extreme weather, and their fields are filled with mud. Planting season will be much shorter, crop production goes down, and in fact, the nutrient quality of the crops will also deteriorate. Not just in Iowa, but in America and all over the world. You talk about fish, where so many people around the world get their protein from. Species of fish are now dying as the ocean becomes warmer. Fish are moving away from places where people have historically fished. So we have a global crisis on our hands. And every day we delay action is a delay that we endanger the lives of our kids and future generations. And I'm very proud to tell you that I have introduced the most comprehensive climate change legislation ever introduced by any candidate running for President of the United States. And the good news is that what this proposal does is not only transform our energy system away from fossil fuels in order to save the planet, it can also create up to 20 million new jobs. So if you're interested in decent paying jobs, the Green New Deal, which our plan is based upon, will do just that. Let me conclude, and then we'll just get into a discussion by telling you, I wish I could come before you today and say, look, things are going pretty well, and we need a little fix here and a little tinkering around the edges over there, and maybe we'll do a little bit over here, and then things will be okay. If I told you that, I would be lying. We have severe crises in this country. We have massive income and wealth inequality. We are moving toward an oligarchy. And if you believe in democracy, we are going to have to deal with that. We're going to have to take on the billionaire class. And if you believe in an economy that works for all, we got to deal with massive income and wealth inequality. If you think that healthcare is a right, we're going to have to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies. And if you're worried about corporate power, we're going to have to take on Wall Street. You're going to have to take on the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex and all of that stuff. That's what we have to do. So what our campaign is about, and what the mantra of our campaign is about, is us, not me. Us, not me. Question. What does that mean, us, not me? What does that mean? Is that just a bumper sticker? Yeah, it is a bumper sticker, we got it. But it's more than a bumper sticker. What does that mean? This is all right, everybody gets representation, that's part of it. The truth is, us, not me, is a very profound statement in 3 words. Yup, in the back there, stand up, be loud. Well, you got a mic coming to you.
It means when you boost everybody, you boost yourself too.
Good. What else does it mean? Yes, the woman in the red, right there. Right.
Hi. It is trickle up rather than trickle down.
Absolutely. Good.
It's the village raised the child. The village also supports everyone.
Good. What else does it mean? What does it mean in terms of political power? Okay, I see a hand right here. Stand up. You got a mic coming, sir.
I believe that it means that this campaign is about everybody, not just about you. And I believe that this is a campaign to empower the people so we can make the changes.
Good. What everybody said is right. I'll pick up what the gentleman just said. And let me be honest with you and tell you what no other presidential candidate will tell you. You see, I'm not here to say, vote for me, and I'm president, I'm going to do all these wonderful things. You can go back to sleep. You don't have to worry about it. That's not the case. That is just not the way it works. Now, what the television won't talk to you about, and what Congress doesn't talk to you about, is power in America. All of you have power? Really? All of you want to run for president? Michael Bloomberg announced the other day he's running for president. Media loved it. Got a huge amount of discussion. What differentiates Mr. Bloomberg from you?
Billions of dollars.
About $55 billion, I assume. All right. So all of you who are billionaires, you want to run for president, get on the phone now, get yourself a consultant, start buying the airwaves here in Iowa. All right? Buy all your consultants, and you have a shot to win it. Because you're a billionaire. Now, I don't think you have a shot to win it, but you will be considered to be a serious candidate.
By the news media.
By the news media, and by the commercials that you run. All right. So the point is, we have got to decide what democracy means. And what I'm here to tell you is that no candidate for president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, if elected, can do it alone. Do you think I can alone take on the drug companies? Well, you're damn well sure I will do everything I can, but they are very, very powerful people. And the insurance companies, and Wall Street. So what we need to understand is how change takes place. How does change take place historically in America? How did workers end up getting a decent shape? What was one vehicle that they had to give them better wages and working conditions and dignity on the job? What was it? Unions. Unions. You think that unions came from a president of the United States who said 120 years ago, I think it would be a great idea for workers to join unions? That's not the way it happened. It happened because workers stood up and struggled and organized, sometimes got killed, sometimes were beaten, sometimes were thrown in jail. Because they understood that by standing together, they had a shot at getting decent wages and working conditions and a little bit of dignity on the job. And what about the women's movement? You think it happened because some president of the United States said, I woke up last night and I think it is wrong that women can't go to college, can't do the jobs they want, and can't even vote. And I'm going to change that as president. You think that's the way that change took place? No. It didn't take place that way. It took place because women and their male allies, by the millions, stood up, fought back. Some of those women died, suffragettes, in the struggle for women's rights. They said, we're women. You're not going to define who we are. We want a good education. We want good jobs. We want to be able to vote. We want to participate in the political process. You ain't going to stop us. We're fighting for it. Civil rights movement.
That's right.
Same thing. It wasn't all Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great leaders of modern history. It was millions of people who stood together, black and white, and said, you know what? We're going to do everything possible to end racism in America. Same thing with the gay rights movement. Same thing with the environmental movement. That's the only way the change ever takes place. Never from the top down, always when millions of people stand up and fight back. That's what this campaign is about. So our campaign, with your help, is about winning here in Iowa. And by the way, with your help, we will win here in Iowa. It is about winning the Democratic nomination, and I think we stand a really good chance to do that. It is about defeating the most dangerous president in the modern history of our country, Donald Trump. But, unlike other campaigns, our campaign is about more than all of that. It is about transforming this country. And to do that, all of us have got to be in it together. That's what us, not me. I can't do it alone. I will lead the way. I will do everything I humanly can. But I know these guys. I know the billionaire class. I know the corporate media. I know what their power is about. And the only way we bring about change is when people stand up and demand it. And that is what this campaign is about. All right, let me ask you a question and you ask me a question. I'm on the floor of the U.S. Senate. My colleagues get up there and they say, we have the best healthcare system in the world.
Wrong answer.
Give me some examples of how that might not be 100% true. Sir, do you want to?
The price of what you have to pay out of your paycheck for your family care or anything is so expensive, you got to make a choice of whether you're going to pay for insurance, or like my case, I have the VA to fall back on, but in rural Iowa area, that also means you got to drive 50 miles to go to the doctor.
That's right.
And no dental unless you're 80% disabled. No vision. So, but you got to make the choice. Are you going to eat, or are you making a puny paycheck? Because half of your money went to pay for one bill of medical insurance. That's one reason. I lived abroad, and I've seen the plans of the other countries. I lived in Germany. I've seen what they do for the people in Germany. They have insurance rights. We don't. They don't lose half their money to pay for insurance. We do. So I don't know how that's better than what they have abroad.
Rodney raises an issue that we don't talk about enough. And Chris touched on that a little bit. And let's discuss it. Healthcare is not free. It's never going to be free. Healthcare is a pretty expensive proposition. Right now, we pay for healthcare in a totally regressive way. What we're saying is if you are the median income family in America, right in the middle of the American economy, you're making about $60,000 a year. You're paying about $12,000 a year for health insurance. It's 20% of your income. That is a hell of a lot of money. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
It's a hell of a lot of money if you're a working family. On the Medicare for All, what we do, so you all understand this because you're going to see a lot of lies on TV from the industry and others. This is what it's about. We eliminate all premiums, right? You ain't going to pay no more premium. No more co-payment when you walk into the doctor's office. There's no more insane thing called a deductible. You all know what a deductible is? Yes. Take a step back and think how crazy it is. You have insurance, but you have to spend the first $5,000 of your healthcare needs out of your own pocket, or $10,000, whatever it may be. How crazy is that? So we eliminate deductibles, we'll talk about that in a minute, and then we eliminate all out-of-pocket expenses, and under our Medicare for All plan, nobody pays more than $200 a year for prescription drugs because we take on the pharmaceutical industry and we substantially lower the cost of medicine. We talked about vision on the Medicare for All because it's comprehensive health care. I don't know how you have comprehensive health care without vision, without hearing aids, without dental care, without home health care. We include all of that in our Medicare for All program. Now, is this free? Can I bring this about without any cost? Of course not. It's an expensive proposition. But, as Chris was saying a moment ago, first of all, we eliminate the $100 billion in profiteering from the drug companies and the insurance companies. And then, what we also do, Chris made reference to this as well, is because we have thousands of separate insurance plans in this country. If I went around the room and I asked everybody to tell me their insurance plan, we probably have dozens right in this room right now. You have a $5,000 deductible, you have an $8,000, you're in this network, you're in that network. Your plan covers this prescription drug, your plan covers that prescription drug, your premium is this, your premium is that, you have Medicaid, you have Medicare, you have employer-based health insurance. It is a nightmare to administer this. You go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, they got to deal with all kinds of bureaucracy to process your claims. Medicare for All is a very simple program. What we do is right now, Medicare, people are eligible for Medicare when they're 65. We lower the eligibility age in year 1 to 55. Yeah. Okay, how's that? All right. Year 2 to 45, year 3 to 35, year 4, everybody is in. It is the least complicated, least disruptive program. Now, how do you pay for it? Okay?
Tax the rich.
Well, that is one way you're going to pay for it, that's absolutely for sure. But the other way we pay for it, which would impact average working people, this is what we say, okay? No more premiums, no more out-of-pocket expenses, no more than $200 a year for prescription drugs. That's what you get. But you're going to have to pay for it. So what we do is we have a 4% tax on income, excluding the first $29,000. That is exempt. So if you make that $60,000 a year in the middle of the income, you're paying taxes on $31,000 times 4% is about $1,200 a year for permanent, comprehensive health care. How's that? So when you see the ads that are up and will surely be coming, Bernie Sanders wants to raise your taxes. Yeah. But Bernie Sanders wants to get away with all of the premiums you're paying, all the co-payments you're paying, all of the out-of-pocket expenses you're paying, all of the costs you're paying on prescription drugs except $200. Mark my words, the ad will not quite include that in. All right? So that's really what the story is. So we'll be attacked for saying that we want the average person to pay $1,200 a year in taxes, but they forget to tell you what you get. And meanwhile, my friends out there who are running against me, they don't want to deal with Medicare for All. It's a terrible, they love private insurance. Well, under private insurance, that average family in the middle paying $12,000 a year. All right, I think paying $1,200 is a lot better than paying $12,000 from where I come. All right, well, word or two on questions, comments on healthcare, and then we'll go on to any issue you want. Healthcare.
Who manages it?
Who manages what?
The healthcare system.
The healthcare system will be managed in a way that Medicare is right now. It will be expanded to cover all of our people. And Medicare right now, is the most efficient, cost-effective health program in the country. Okay, questions? Yes, sir.
I have a story and evidence that I believe can expose the severe corruption in the medical industry.
Tell us. Your name is?
My name is Dustin Menke. And I just want to thank you, Bernie, for fighting for us all these years. You're the most amazing politician of my lifetime, and I thank you.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Okay, I'm sorry. But anyhow, just to be straight here, Mayo Clinic dropped me in surgery and broke my neck. I have been denied medical care afterwards. I have substantial evidence to prove this. I'm sitting here with a breathing tube that's sitting in my chest that's being denied by medical professionals. My entire radiology history was altered. I have 2 sets of genitals. You can see 2 penises in my x-rays because before the surgery, I had no fractures in my body. And now I'm littered with fractures, so they took the old images and they stamped them on top of the new ones.
Okay, you know what I'd like to do? Why don't you and I talk about that after this? Okay, rather than going to the whole.
And I want to thank the nurse for speaking out because I'm here to fight for you too. I know there's good people in the medical industry.
Wonderful people.
That can't speak out
That's
about
you and
this, so thank you for talking today.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
Hello. I agree with everything that you say, and it keeps, in my mind, it keeps coming back to the same point. The big moneyed interests that are right now in control. How do we deal with a system where money is free speech and corporations have the rights of citizens without the responsibility of citizens without making a major change to the Constitution, which I'm kind of for.
Well, one of the things that, thank you very much. What's your name, by the way?
Jason Border.
Jason. Jason asked a very fundamentally important question, maybe the most important question. I think what you're talking about is that we need change in our campaign finance system. And if we don't do that, big money continues to dominate everything that we do. All right, so what do we do? Well, for a start, Jason, we're going to do everything we can to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that Republican governors are no longer able to suppress the vote, make it harder for people to participate in the We're going to do everything we can to end the kind of extreme gerrymandering which now goes on, which denies people one person, one vote. And we are going to move toward public funding of elections. So there are ways to deal with this issue. But you're right in saying that so long as billionaires are able to buy elections, just go to some website, the websites are out there. Find how much money the drug companies have spent on lobbying and campaign contributions over the last 20 years. I think the number is about $4 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions. And that's why we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Okay, other questions on any issue? Yeah, gentleman back there. Yes, sir.
Well, I'd like you to speak to the fact that our economy is basically being fueled by borrowing $1 trillion a year. I cannot see how our economy is considered great when we were borrowing that much money to drive it.
Right, we've got a $23 trillion debt, and under Trump it has gone up significantly, and this is an issue that we have got to deal with. And when you give massive tax breaks to the rich, when you give massive tax breaks and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, when you now spend more than the 10 next nations combined on military spending, and spend $750 billion a year on the military, you know what? Your national debt is going to go up. And this is an issue that we have to deal with. And the way we deal with it is not only cutting back on waste in government, of which there is plenty, and cost fixing and overruns, but we also make it clear to the wealthiest people in this country, who in some cases are paying less in taxes than you are, Do you know how much Amazon, which made $10 billion in profit last year, owned by the wealthiest guy in the country, you know how much they're paying in taxes? Zero. I mean, that is insane. Why? Why? Because they own the United States government. Why else? Corruption. I mean, why do you think? So you have people in Congress who figure out, well, that's what Trump's tax bill is about. Trump came to Iowa 4 years ago, Iowa voted for him, and he said, you know, we're going to have a tax bill which will work for working people, the middle class. 83% of the benefits over a 10-year period of his tax bill go to the top 1%. He lied. So what you need is a progressive tax system, which in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, makes it clear that the wealthy and the powerful will start paying their fair share of taxes. Okay, other questions? Right here, sir.
If my neighbors ran their finances like the United States does, borrowing money every year, we'd put them in prison. Why does the rest of the world tolerate us running our finances like this?
Well, I don't know, just the rest of the world tolerating the way we run our finances. It is, the rest of the world is looking increasingly askance at the way we run our government, I'll tell you that, and who our president is. So it's not just finances, it's that we have a president who aligns himself. You know, you've noticed over the years, he always has nice words to say about dictators around the world. Anyone notice that? Oh, he loves Mr. Putin, good pal, and nice words about Kim Jong-un, who's a ruthless dictator in North Korea. Nice words about Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, who is a murderer. Right, exactly. You name the dictatorship and he has nice words about it. But then, when it comes to our historical allies who believe in democracy, whether it's the Canadians, the Germans, the French, the British, often he has hostile words. How does that happen that our historic allies who share with us a belief in democracy are attacked by this president, and dictators around the world are people he feels comfortable with? So I think that is an issue that we have to be very mindful of. Maybe just a couple more. Are there any questions back here? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to hear your thoughts on. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on the gun issue.
Yes.
And how we keep our kids safe in school.
Everyone hear that question? Thank you. I was in Iowa. I don't remember the town that I was in. We had a meeting just like this. And a young man looked at me like about 6'2", looked like a football player. He was in high school, big strong guy. And he got up and he said, you know, Senator, I got to tell you that the kids in my school are very frightened about the possibility of a shooting. And then I talked to a woman in New Hampshire who gets up and says, Bernie, what do I do when my daughter, who's, I think 11 years of age or something, wants me to buy her a bulletproof backpack? Okay? So when we talk about gun violence, it is not just 40,000 people who die from gun violence. It's not just the horrible mass shootings that we have all seen and the trauma those raises. It is the fact that we got millions of kids today who go into school who are frightened. Kids who are taking drills. You know, what school is about is supposed to be a place of safety, where you learn, you socialize. Now you got to worry about whether or not something terrible is going to happen. So this is a major, major issue that we have to deal with. And I will answer your question simply by saying, most importantly, we will have gun policy in this country dictated by the American people, not the NRA. And what that means is you do what the American people want. There are disagreements, but I'm actually, whether you're from a rural state like Vermont or Iowa or an urban area, Los Angeles, New York, people coming together. What does it mean? It means universal, extensive background checks. All right, you have a history of violence, you know what, you ain't gonna own a gun. It means that we do away with the so-called gun show loophole, which allows people to avoid the background checks. It means that we make sure that we do away with the straw man provision, which means that you could legally buy a gun today and then sell those guns to criminals. It means, and the American people increasingly support what I believe for 30 years, that we understand that assault weapons are weapons designed to kill human beings as rapidly as possible, and that we ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. You know, and I know the NRA and some politicians will say, you know, we were trying to take away guns for everybody in America. That is 100% lie. In my state, you got tens of thousands of people who hunt, who own guns, and that's fine. And that's fine with me. That's, you know, what people do. People hunt. It's hard to practice. Nobody is threatening that. But what we are trying to do is make sure that when our kids go to school, they are safe, and that we do everything that we can possibly do to end this terrible mass shootings that we have seen. Okay, maybe one or two more questions. All right, young man right here.
Thank you, Senator.
You've got a mic coming.
Thank you. I'm just here today because I have a very close friend who lives right now in Venezuela. And so when I consider what candidates I'm going to support this election, I want to support somebody who's 100% committed to the restoration of democracy, human rights, and rule of law in that country. Along with Venezuelans from across the country, I went to Washington, D.C. a month ago, and we met with different, staffers and members of Congress. We met with your foreign policy aide, and I know that a lot of members of our community would be really eager to meet with you, to talk with you about what we can do for the Venezuelan diaspora. I want to thank you for your support of the TPS, and I know for a lot of Venezuelans that I talk to from across the country, it's really important too that we support the National Assembly, the last legitimately elected body of government in Venezuela, that we support the interim president and his determination to bring back that democracy, human rights, and rule of law, and that we have a tough approach on people that are, making billions and millions while other people are struggling. So.
Thank you. You're quite right. The situation in Venezuela is desperate. People are going hungry. Children are going hungry. They're living under an increasingly dictatorial, anti-democratic society, and that's got to change. So I believe and have always believed that under international supervision, that there be free elections held in Venezuela so the people of Venezuela can determine their own future. But it's not just Venezuela. What we're seeing all over the world is a growth in authoritarian governments. And that is something, I happen to believe, maybe I'm old-fashioned, that what America stood for and must stand for is democracy and human rights, not support for authoritarian. All right, with that, I think we're going to have to move on, but I just wanted to thank all of you for coming out. This is a perilous moment in American history. My last, I have a request of you, is we are going to be doing some massive campaign literature drops. Anybody here interested in helping us go door to door handing out literature? Anybody do that? Yeah. All right. You give your name to Misty. Misty is our state director here in Iowa. But we could use some help just doing door hangers that we'll do in a few weeks or so. All right. Thank you all very much.